This is my first time sitting up here, so it feels a bit awkward. But it's nice to have this view with so many friendly and familiar faces. As I was editing this, about where I was before coming to temple, my practice since, and today's path, I realized a funny thing. I'd never given a talk in which I didn't have to demonstrate how much I knew about something. In my Wand perpetual calendar, the message for yesterday, which I tore out from my talk yesterday, is by Master Chung San, the second Dharma master. And he wrote, "Knowledge is different from self-awakening. If knowledge is not accompanied by self-awakening, one will be no more than a slave to one's knowledge." How did he know about my struggles? Haven't I been trying to unlearn the ways I used to learn according to my old behaviors? So, as I know least about today, I'm going to start with the present. A couple of months ago, I decided it was time to take this seat. I was wandering through the kitchen and saw the empty slot for this weekend. And seemingly out of the blue, I picked the title Hungry Ghost. All I knew was that I'd been living as one, and that sometime during the past few months, I'd stopped. I had stopped craving. I had stopped hiding. I had stopped roaming. Il-Wan-San, the circle image that contains everything and nothing, finally made sense. In the chanting booklet on page 10, I'd like to quote a line from the truth of Il-Wan-San, the circle image, one circle image. "Through the light of the void and calm, numinous awareness, the discrimination regarding great and small, being and non-being appears." Since then, I've felt light as a helium-filled balloon with a tail of curly ribbon, and as sturdy as my heart that has been working for more than 20,000 days. I've been seeing little inner Buddhas everywhere, and they're smiling. And on or off the mat, feelings of all sorts have been more intense. This spring particularly, it seemed like every tree had a different color green, and the weeds and the grasses all were different color greens. It was sort of psychedelic. But the practice of meditation has enabled me to see the greens and the feelings as they pass through, to accept them, and more often than not react on or off the mat, here or outside. Equanimity has become one of my favorite words, but I cannot pronounce the adjective, and that does not matter. I trust my teachers, guides, and partners. As Reverend Wangang says, breathe in, breathe out, drop the rock. I try. The first time I heard of a hungry ghost was only a couple of years ago, reading a Western Buddhist magazine. The title was interesting, but when I saw the accompanying drawing, I was captivated. It was like meeting up with an old friend. After decades, no small talk was required. The hungry ghost is depicted in various iterations of humanoids with contorted faces, distended bellies, skeletal limbs, constricted necks, and tiny mouths. These creatures looked like I'd felt. I wanted to get to know them. So what is a hungry ghost? In the glossary of the booklet is a definition of what is considered in Buddhism to be the wheel of life, which contains 6 realms of existence or states. Originally, they described the states of reincarnation, but in more modern terms they're viewed as states we are in throughout the day or our lives. In the back it says, these states or forms of rebirth depend on the balance of their karma. From hell dwellers, hungry ghosts, animals, restless spirits, human beings, or heavenly beings, these are traditionally understood in both literal and metaphorical ways. Metaphorically, they represent the different states of mind we cycle through from moment to moment, depending on our reactions to our changing internal and external circumstances. So the hungry ghost wanders in a realm just a bit less awful than hell, perpetually seeking food and water. The problem of the hungry ghost is what the second noble truth describes as the cause of suffering. It wants, it craves, it never has enough, and it always wants more. Part of my before story was that I was born starving and underweight. I stayed underweight, the skinniest kid in my class, and was labeled as an infant colicky. Then as I grew older, fussy, finicky, and sometimes peculiar. And for as long as I can remember, I had one or another sort of digestive problem, pain, discomfort, and other things. I found a way to eat that didn't cause as many problems. I nibbled. I never felt hungry, and I never felt full. I saw specialists and had tests, but the cause of my suffering couldn't be found. Later, I went to medical school and figured it out, but throughout my life, I've thought about food and eating from morning until bedtime, if I slept. The only times I sat down and ate 3 meals a day, day after day, was if I went on vacation with someone else. I exercised a lot. It calmed me down enough to sit and pay attention or study. These habits and various chemical dependencies, including caffeine and nicotine and some others, kept my weight at the low end of normal or below normal until I was 44, when I had extensive spine surgery. It took 2 years after that for me to be able to walk a 40-minute mile. I wasn't burning calories the way I used to. So in the decade after that, I gained 60 pounds over my original weight, which was on the low end, and I stopped using the scale at 200. In parallel to my physical hunger, behaviors, and cravings, the other predominant theme of my before journey is that I craved attention from teachers or bosses or mentors, almost always from afar. But not all attention was welcome. Sometimes I couldn't tell the difference between the good and the bad. I rode a seesaw of craving and aversion, thrilled on the trip up and defiant on the trip down. The theme song to Rocky became my anthem. I wanted gold stars, blue ribbons, trophies. I defined who I was by what I did. I'll share a quote from an article I recently read on a more modern description of living as a hungry ghost, as it perfectly describes my craving. Quote, "We search for satisfaction and fulfillment, only to find that it turns to fire and ash in our lives. We latch onto the idea of that good job, the relationship, or the achievement of that goal as the thing which will finally make us happy, which will finally make us feel good about ourselves. When we actually grasp the thing we've set our minds on, we find that our emptiness still aches inside. So we scramble after the next big thing. Here we have the essence of the hungry ghost realm, brought to our human experience." End quote. So no matter how much I accomplished or how many people I helped, I could not feel full by eating what others defined as food. Before I started to come to the Wan Temple, I'd been worn out for many years. I'd put Band-Aids on wounds that needed stitches. My inner and outer resources had been depleted. I had depleted them by not pausing long enough to look at myself, to see that my hunger was not about food. I'd given up watching what I ate while awake, and in the morning, on the kitchen counter, I'd found wrappers of food that had been in the refrigerator. I was sleepwalking in the realm of the hungry ghost. Still, I woke up hungry. I ate to numb, to escape feeling anything. After a couple of years coming to temple, when I learned how to sit and just do nothing, my hungry ghost came out of hiding. I think this took some coaxing, and I found the greatest peace and serenity working in the kitchen. I love to clean the temple kitchen because it was so clean to begin with, I couldn't fail. After 15 sticky-fingered kids had been running through it for 2 hours, it was cleaner than my kitchen ever was before I started to cook a meal. And ultimately, it was a very safe place to be, and one of many places I liked around temple as well. I really liked washing dishes when Reverend Wangang would come and pop grapes in my mouth to keep me hydrated and working longer. And the same thing happens when you're digging, so come do meditation working at the temple. And I felt like a fledgling bird in the nest, and the mama or daddy's coming and giving me a piece of worm. And I never felt that way, as safely and without fanfare, just like, this is a grape, it's going in your mouth. And I think it was here where I first had a light bulb moment. No matter what I did, weeding, digging, washing, you might have had this experience. Out of the blue, Reverend Wangang would show up, and she'd fix the earth that I'd been digging and turning over. Okay, gotta be smooth. And I'd dig a weed. That spreads the weed seeds. Okay. And, you know, I asked another regular from temple, I said, doesn't that ever bother you? And he said, no, you know, my mom taught me, I might as well do it her way. I said, yeah, but I know how to dig, I know how to weed, I know how to wipe crumbs off the floor. And he said, well, it's her temple. And that was when I realized what I did not define who I was, and that as far as Reverend Wangang or Ginger were concerned, those were tasks that I could learn how to do the way they want me to do it. And that was not a reflection on how good or bad I was. So I really like making mistakes around here because I get attention. So when my hungry ghost came out, she was just as ugly as the ones in the first drawing I'd seen. I got to know her, why she'd been so hungry, and all the things she'd done to try and get fed. Lying, deceit, manipulation, things she hadn't wanted to do, but did, because she was starving and afraid that she'd never eat again. Always afraid. So back to today, my perspective on life is no longer predicated on fear. As one of my teachers has said, fear was once a necessary instinct, back when our ancestors needed to know the difference between a tabby cat and a tiger. The ones who went up to the tiger and said, here, kitty, kitty, did not become our ancestors. They became cat food. So mysteries and not knowing are not frightening anymore. The boundary between myself and non-self looks like a vapor rising up from the cold earth, from the hot earth into the cold morning air. One Buddhist-oriented psychiatrist has written, sometimes you need to find yourself before you can be your non-self. So according to Buddha, this took me a long time to understand, because I thought sentient beings like my dog were really Buddhas, because he was pretty much always happy. But what differentiates humans from other sentient beings and those in the other 5 realms of existence is that we're given a consciousness, and thus we have a choice. So I made the choice. I dropped the rock, and I'm very grateful to be here now, breathing with all of you. Thank you.